Hi guys, welcome to another lesson. Today we're going to talk about skank beats. Skank beats can be very, it's a very common topic and can be a very simple groove to play. But today we will see how we can be creative and how we can use the skank beat, how many types of skank beat there are and there exist, but also how can we expand and what can we do with all these various skank beats. So first of all, for who doesn't know what a skank beat is, I'm gonna play it real quick so that you have it in your mind, you understand how the skank beats sound, and then we will start working on different topics about the skank beat, and we can start expanding it. Okay, so basically breaking down the skank beat, we will have our right hand keeping the 16 notes, our foot playing, so the kick playing 1 and 3, and our left hand or snare playing 2 and 4. Okay, this is the standard skank beat that, usually it's played in this way. So once we break this down, we can give a role to each part of our body to play and execute the skank beat, and we can expand it. But first of that, I want to first of all work and discuss about technique. Okay, so skank beat is usually a groove that needs a good dynamic of the kick and the snare drum. So these two parts of the drums are the ones that kind of make the skank beat itself. I like to play it with a rim shot on the snare and use a leg motion for the kick so that it sounds this way. It's very powerful, it has a lot of dynamic, and then I can work with my right hand or with the hand that I'm using on the cymbals to, accent and do different things. As if you go back and see what I was doing before, I was accenting on the crashes and then playing some accents on the right bell and stuff like that, which is just, an embellishment to the skank beat, and it helps to follow whatever the other guys in the band or the music is doing. As a technique, to play this regular skank beat, I use, depending on the speed, arm motion or wrist motion, and I like to keep the grip solid with these 3 fingers so that I don't get cramps and I don't have hard times in hitting hard on the snare. But using only these 3 fingers will allow me to absorb the impact on the snare. If you try this at home and you try to literally hold a stick with these 3 fingers and hit the snare drum, you will see that you won't have any you won't have any tension in holding the stick. Instead, if you only mainly use these 2 fingers, you will have hard times in keeping a solid grip to this groove because of the hard impact. When you want to have a very loud snare drum or hit hard on drums, you need to make sure that your grip is solid, and this is a great way to do it. If not, you will lose the stick, or it will have cramps and start hurting your hand and stuff like that. Instead, with my foot, I like to use just leg motion so that I have a lot of power and I have a lot of volume while I play this. And on my right foot, depending on the speed, I could, there's people who use the Muller kind of approach, so playing a little accent on 1 and 3, and so there's something like this. you know, that gives that type of dynamic that you can do, or you can just play straight. And I use either German or French grip. Depending on the speed, usually I use the German grip until a certain speed, and now when I have to go even faster, I'll switch to the French grip so that I use my fingers. In this case, if I use the hi-hat closed or the ride, which have a good rebound. If not, I would, you know, still work on the wrist motion, or maybe use the Muller kind of motion if the hi-hat is open, or if I'm playing on something that doesn't have a lot of rebound. Okay, and by the way, these are just techniques that I suggest because they work for me and I feel comfortable using them. Of course, you guys can use whatever technique works for you and you're comfortable to use. But let's also understand when the skank beat is a good beat to use musically. Okay, so in my opinion, the skank beat can have two different roles. One is to play give a kind of a fast feeling, not as fast as a blast beat, but still something very aggressive and very fast, because of how like the amount of strokes that we play on the snare. It's just a lot. It reminds of something that's running, something that's going like pretty fast. So if we use this and compare this to like a mid-tempo, it would sound something like this, and it will give you an idea of the speed feeling that the skank beat gives you. So okay, so as you can see, it's something that it kind of the mid-tempo part lays down. It's something like more laid down, and then the skank beat, it's like speeding up. So the amount of notes that we play on the snare really makes this beat kind of like a fast beat. It's in between, you know, a mid-tempo and a blast beat. I like to put the skank beats when I am building, you know, something, and I want to go, you know, fast, and then when I want to go faster, I use the blast beat. So it gives you even more feeling of, you know, being fast. So we can play the skank beat putting the snare on the upbeat or on the downbeat, and this will also give two completely different feelings in a song. I will compare them now. I will alternate the two types of skank beats so that you can have, you know, you can feel what's the difference between having the snare on a downbeat or the snare on the upbeat. So let's see this. Okay, so we can see how the two skank beats are both kind of like a fast beat, but in my opinion, when I play the snare on the downbeat, so on 2 and 4, it's kind of like going a little bit faster. It's like if you're running somewhere. Instead, when you're playing the snare on the upbeat, so on 1 and 3, it kind of gives me a feeling like it's dragging a little bit back. It's like I can kind of use this to make something grow and then explode and start running with the snare drum on the downbeat. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. Okay, so I went from a mid-tempo situation of a laid-back situation to a skank beat with the snare on the upbeat that kind of gives me the feeling of something is starting, something is going to happen. And then I've jumped into the skank beat with the snare on the downbeat that gives you that feeling of starting to run. Okay, so this is just how I like to use the skank beats, and I think it works pretty well musically. But of course, again, you guys can use and you know, apply the skank beat in your music however works for your music. Let's see some variations that we can do on the skank beat. Of course, we can start from changing our hands and creating, for example, there are different ways that you can play a skank beat. On the hi-hat or on, you know, the cymbal hand, you can either play all the 16 notes, so in this way, or just the notes with the snare drum, or just the notes with the kick. Same thing as before, each of these ways of playing, it's gonna give you a different effect of the skank beat. So you might want to try this and see, you know, how the music and how what you're writing changes based on how you put the hi-hat. Same thing you can, you know, apply with the hi-hat, with the ride, crash chinas, whatever you're doing. You can accent everything you want. Just keeping and always keeping, you know, the kick and the snare going, you know, playing this beat. Then the same thing, of course, if we play the snare drum on the upbeat or downbeat, you know, it doesn't really changes. You can play, you know, 16 notes. Okay, so it really depends on how you want to use this. Then we can also see how we can change the kick. And here we can open a very big topic because the kick can become something very particular for the skank beat. So you can either just play 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 based on, you know, the type of skank beat that you're playing, single notes using leg motion, or like usually in punk rock, a lot of drummers use the double stroke on the 3, so it would sound something like. Okay, or you can, you know, you can change, and we can start playing the kick in different points. And so, for example, if we keep in mind our hand, and we keep our hands as a pattern that, you know, never changes, and we put the kick, the single strokes of the kick, wherever we want, we can create many different types of, you know, situation in the skank beat. So. Okay, an example or another very common skank beat used always in punk music is this one. Where basically we play the downbeat on 1 and then the upbeat of 3. So then we can mix, you know, this type of skank with the double stroke skank having something. And so on. So it's really something, you know, on the single and double strokes, you can become creative. You can put the double strokes on one and so on, and have all these kind of feelings. Then we can also start using both our bass drums or our double pedal, and start playing 30-second notes on the skank beat. So it would sound something like this. Okay, so basically here what will happen, and the way to coordinate this and to keep control of what's happening, is to always keep the right hand as a reference, okay, that dictates the notes and, you know, the cycles. So it's 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, and we always know where the 1 is. And then we play everything on our leading hand. So for example, I will keep my left hand on 2 and 4. So and same thing with my bass drums, and I will know that my right foot will always stay unison to my leading hand, so in this case the right hand, and the left foot, it's going to play, you know, filling the spaces of the notes of the right foot. So will always be in the upbeat of the right foot. So okay, so in this way it will be much easier for me to keep control of the skank beat in this way, and I won't lose the control of the notes that I'm playing. So I won't have the kicks just being like popcorned in the beat and then the ride going somewhere else or something like that. But it's all gonna be very tight, very controlled, and I will always keep, you know, the main reference in my right hand. Then I'll add kicks, thinking of the right foot unison to the right, left foot playing in relation of the right foot. Then to speed this up, that's going to be a technique matter. It's going to be something that you will have to figure out which technique, you know, you can use with your feet, and which part of you know, your body will play many notes and will play very fast. Also here we can apply the other ways of playing the skank beat that we saw before. So having the 16 notes played with our hand, or just playing the 1 and 3 with our cymbal hand or leading hand, and 2 and 4 with on our snares. So okay, and still the way I will think of the you know, how I will coordinate my feet to this pattern, it's going to be, I will think of having the right foot always unison, first to my right hand and then to my left hand. So, and then I will add my left foot. So I will have to divide, you know, the unison thing first on the right hand, second on the left hand, and the left foot will always play related to that. Instead, things changes when we play the cymbal with the snare unison, because at that point there will be a lot of space between each stroke for the 30-second notes, because I will basically play 8 notes on top of 30-second notes. So in this case, what I do is I change the reference from the right hand to the feet, because the feet are going to be the ones that are going to play more notes. So my right foot actually becomes the guide of everything that I'm playing. So I will play everything on top of my right foot. Okay, so this is the only time that I switch the control, just because it's easier. It's easier to think of this as a leading instead of having this and still having my right hand as a, you know, as a lead for the beat. So it's something that helps me a lot to simplify and execute and be very accurate in playing the blast beats, especially with the 2 kicks like that, with 30-second notes, which are many notes, and it's easy to you know, play a confused in a confused way, like a confused skank beat. Instead, it's good to have this type of beats very tight and very accurate to give the right effect that we want to have. Okay. And the last thing that we can do with the skank beats at this point is creating patterns with our feet. So we can try and play like breakdown with our kicks on top of the skank beats. So something like this. We can also make it even harder and you know, be very creative. I will give an example of playing 5 strokes rolls, starting with my right foot and then my left foot, playing a skank beat on top of this, so that you can have, you know, an example of how many applications and how many things you can put on top of the skank beat. So something like this. Or you can play 3 strokes, playing 2 strokes with your right foot and 1 stroke with your left foot, and give another feeling, something like this. Okay, so there really are many things that you can do with the skank beat, especially changing your bass drums. And now that we know how to control the 30-second notes, and we know how to think of, you know, playing so many notes on top of the skank beat, how to use the skank beat and what role can it have in a song, you really have all the weapons to use the skank beat in many different ways. Figure out the techniques that you want to use when you speed up or you start playing many notes, and do that before even before starting to actually speeding that up. For example, I would suggest you, if you want to work on speeding your hand, or if you're having hard times, you know, playing the fast hand on the skank beat for the 16 notes, I would start, you know, I would get rid of information and start working only on one hand and then adding everything else on top of that. So for example, if I want to use the push-pull on the right, I would start working on the push-pull. Then I will start putting my kick on 1 and 3. Okay, so I know that the kick will always go unison with the down motion of the push-pull, and then I will put my snare on 2 and 4. So same thing for your feet. Understand what kind of technique you want to use. Break down everything. Make sure you're able to play each thing on their own before putting everything together, so that you're sure you're gonna have a good sound when you apply this and you execute the skank beat or whatever things you're playing actually. And then speed it up. Make always sure that the kick and the snare are very loud. This is something that I like to address, and I like to hear when they play a skank beat. These two parts of the drum really have to be in your face, because it makes the beat sounds much better. So learn how to play each part first, put everything together, and then start expanding it and try different solutions. Try to move with the single kick notes around, then put the double stroke in it, and then start playing patterns, 30-second notes, and so on. Then put, starting with right foot, left foot, whatever you want to, but always make sure of how you play it. That's the most important thing. Okay, so have a good practice, and I'll see you next time.